Hey everyone, this is Louis7, and for today I have a bit of news on the new legendary servers in the Lord of the Rings Online, and I also want to discuss just some of my thoughts and plans based on that. Unfortunately, I do want to point out the background gameplay isn't really relevant since these servers haven't launched yet. But first of all, the two new legendary servers will launch at some point on Wednesday, June 30th, but the exact time is unannounced. I personally would expect this to be after the morning maintenance with a patch. So one of these servers is a slower progressing legendary server called Treebeard, and the faster one is called Shadowfax, and they're kind of thematic towards the Lord of the Rings characters that they're named after. But for anyone unfamiliar, legendary servers are progression servers that start at the level 50 cap with Shadows of Angmar content, and over time their level cap is progressively raised for different expansion eras in the game. Legendary servers do also require a VIP subscription to play on. But for the new servers, both of them will feature the new landscape difficulty slider feature where you can make open world content harder essentially by debuffing your character, and for that you can also get some small bonuses and rewards with it. So this feature will initially be exclusive to the two new legendary servers, but eventually it is expected to come to the regular servers, but we still don't know exactly when yet. But moving on with this, while more official information is expected on June 30th, we were given a preview of some details for the new servers and the landscape difficulty feature coming with them. And this came from essentially a work in progress article to be published on the servers the day they launch from the community manager's recent stream. So first, let's go ahead and cover Treebeard. This is going to be the slower paced server where you only get 40% of normal XP, which means you do get a minus 60% reduction in the XP, which is quite the debuff, I will say. In addition to that slower leveling, the server will also get new updates with level cap increases and content unlocks at a pace of about 5 to 6 months, which is relatively slow. So this server is obviously for those who want a more relaxed, slower pace with the progression, and it could also allow people who like to play alts to feel like they have more time to progress on them as well before the level cap increases. And compared to the current legendary server progression with Anor, that was actually initially faster than this pace, then for a few periods it was slower than this pace, and more recently it has gone back to being faster than this pace. So that is honestly all quite inconsistent, but it's just something to give you all a reference for you to compare to how Anor was. But moving on, let's go ahead and cover Shadowfax, which has a bit more going on with it than just faster progression. So the progression is set to be about every 2 months for unlocks and level cap increases. In the server, there is going to be a server-wide XP boost to a few things actually. So first, character XP is increased by 50%, which is quite a lot, but you also do have legendary item XP and war steed XP also getting boosted by 50%, so a couple extra. And finally, and perhaps the most interesting to me personally, is a 20% virtue XP boost. So with this, not only can your character level faster than normal, you can also progress in one of LOTRO's core character progression systems faster with the Virtue XP. So I honestly think this can actually be a big problem with LOTRO, where progression systems feel like they matter more than character levels, so that I personally sometimes don't even like boosted XP. But this increase in Virtue XP I think helps alleviate that issue. So I did just want to highlight that I thought this was a great thing to see for this speedy Shadowfax server, and maybe give some players who would want something like that a reason to choose this server. So that is it on the news with the two new servers. To cover the landscape difficulty feature that they launch with, first, the function for this feature is that you talk to an NPC, and with this NPC you can choose from one of 10 tiers of difficulty for open world content in LOTRO. The normal difficulty essentially functions as tier 0 and is the default option that is the same difficulty LOTRO currently uses, and it will always be the default for characters until they choose a different option from this NPC. So if you are not interested in this feature, you just don't have to interact with that at all. It's completely a choice for you. But anyway, from here, you can choose up to 9 more difficulty levels, with the first 3 having proper names going up to Deadly at tier 3, and then Deadly Plus, as it's called, begins at tier 4, and as the name implies, higher tiers just make the landscape more difficult. So the way this functions is actually surprisingly simple, in that it really just debuffs your character, meaning enemies are relatively stronger against you at higher difficulties. In combat, this works out as you doing more damage and taking less damage. So with a deadly tier selected, I will point out you can also get a special Eye of Sauron debuff which enables strong effects from enemies such as AoE circles. Enemies that are in combat with somebody in high difficulty can also occasionally get powerful corruptions that function like buffs, but of course are removable by your corruption removal skills. I should also point out that any group content that is above the size of solo and duo is not affected by landscape difficulty choice, so regular instances and the such don't take advantage of this feature. And one more note I do have on this feature is that if you decide to group up in the open world, every member of your group will take the highest difficulty level selected by a member in the Fellowship. So for example, if someone at tier 4 groups up with someone at tier 6, both players will function as if they are at tier 6. But anyway, that is what this feature is, but what is news is there are new rewards being added. Before, you could only get a title for reaching level 50 and 130 at either tier 1 plus or tier 3 plus difficulty. You would also get a boost of XP up to 20%, starting at 10% at tier 1, 15% at tier 2, and finally it would be 20% at tier 3 plus. So from those base rewards that we had in the beta, the problem with adding more from that is basically the potential for players to abuse or even exploit the system for the increased rewards. But with the work in progress preview that I mentioned, it was shown that you can get up to plus 5% Virtue XP with increased difficulty. Presumably this does mean 1% at tier 1, 3% at tier 2, and 5% at tier 3 plus, but again, nothing 100% confirmed or official on this until Wednesday launch day. That is just how I'm suspecting it will work based on the number that were shown. And I will say that while a 5% Virtue XP boost might sound tiny and insignificant, I actually think this is a great reward and a good boost amount for a feature like this. So if I go back to the concerns of people abusing the system if they made it too rewarding, I think this is a small enough buff to Virtue XP where it may not be worth that effort to, for example, turn up the difficulty just to complete a deed and then turn it back down, or just any other potential abuses with grouping and things like that. But at the same time, this is still better than nothing, and I think even at 5% it is enough to motivate some players, such as myself, to consider turning the difficulty up when otherwise I may not really be encouraged to in the first place. And on top of that, while it isn't necessarily a Virtue XP source on its own, this is going to be something that at least adds another way to gain Virtue XP in a way which I personally am all for. So to me, while it is a small amount, I still thought this was great to see, and I really hope this does make it into the release of the difficulty feature. And that is actually all I have for the news for you all. While it wasn't really much, I wanted to go ahead and share it because I likely will not do a patch breakdown when they come, because instead I plan to join the launch of the servers Wednesday afternoon as a stream here on YouTube if you are interested in checking that out. And in that, I still will talk about the upcoming update and all the official info on the Legendary servers. Also, I do want to point out later this week, I am planning on interviewing LOTRO's producer to discuss some LOTRO topics, and if you didn't know, you can actually help decide what will be discussed by going to my recent community post and commenting your own questions and upvoting which questions you want to see asked. I will leave a link to that in the comments section, which will of course have more details. But let's go ahead and move on from that, and it is time for me to share my plans and personal thoughts on Treebeard versus Shadowfax. And while I do personally plan to start on Treebeard, I will say Shadowfax became a lot more appealing when the plus 20% Virtue XP detail was previewed. With a server like that, I am honestly curious what would happen to the server when it catches up with all the other servers, because I think that is quite an insane boost to have. And as for Shadowfax, the main reason I'm actually not interested in it is its progression speed, which is about every 2 months. So for me, another Legendary server would be something I would want to play kind of every once in a while on the side if I'm looking for something different, or maybe have an organized event specifically on the server. Because of that, I think 2 months is too fast to me, but having said that, I can definitely see the appeal for players who want to maybe dedicate a larger portion of their playtime on these servers. One concern I could foresee if that was my plan with a server like Shadowfax is 2 months could actually feel a little bit slow sometimes. I could see for the first 50 levels 2 months not being too bad, but even being stuck on content for 2 months can be a long time if you are wanting to progress really fast. So that's just something to look out for in the future if you are playing on Shadowfax. And I'm curious to see what the players think of Shadowfax after a few months with that. But the idea of the progression being too fast to me personally brings us to the reason I am more interested in playing on Treebeard. So for an on-the-side server, I believe less frequent updates will allow me to get a better experience on the server. I also think for the low level range, there is an appeal to the giant XP debuff because it can allow you to stay more on level with quests and zones as you progress through the game. Sometimes you may even have to go to that old style of jumping between zones of similar level ranges to level up enough. I know this is something that may sound weird for people less familiar with LOTRO, but the reason I sometimes don't want to level fast in LOTRO is because, one, I can still get a sense of progression compared to disabling my XP, and two, it allows me to feel more immersive on my character and experience more of one of the things I love most in LOTRO, which is low-level leveling, especially in Eriador. But anyway, that is generally where I am on these two legendary servers. What I am more excited for is honestly the landscape difficulty slider that is debuting on these servers. Without this feature, I honestly probably wouldn't even play on Treebeard to begin with because I just think it would split up my playtime too much. But this new option really does push me over the edge to where I do want to try it out and hope to regularly play there in the future. I will point out one concern I do have with Treebeard is that it might be progressing too fast. Every 5 to 6 months seems a little bit fast for a legendary server that is said to progress slowly. This is at some points a little bit slower than a Nor, but even at other points a little bit faster than a Nor. And I think there were a lot of early times when a Nor was progressing too fast, and then there were other times I will admit that I thought a Nor progressed too slowly, but that's just because of my personal interest in the content and let's say the amount of content, especially when you got to places like Rohan and Helm's Deep and the such, where there's a lot more limited content that you just run out of stuff a lot quicker compared to earlier updates. But setting that whole thing aside, I am just a little bit concerned that Treebeard will be progressing a little bit too fast for me. But anyway, I will set that aside for now and just say that is all I have for this video on the two new legendary servers with Treebeard and Shadowfax, and LOTRO and the landscape difficulty feature coming on them. Again, I look forward to playing on Treebeard, and I will be streaming that Wednesday evening right here on YouTube. So I am interested in what you all are planning, if anything, for these servers. So let me know in the comments below, and as far as this video goes, I hope you all enjoyed it and maybe learned something useful. And if you did, please consider liking and subscribing for more, or becoming a channel member to support the content, and thanks for watching, everyone.